All right, we are live. So, everyone's joining in. Thanks. Please keep yourself muted and appreciate you being here. This is the start of our Business Resiliency webinar series with Austin Tenet at Houston Community College. Today's topic is on growing your success mindset in the face of extreme uncertainty. Given where we are today in the world with this COVID-19, this is a great opportunity for us to kind of take a step back and reevaluate and take a leap forward with a success mindset. And Austin is an entrepreneur in residence at HCC, as well as the founder and owner of his business consulting. I'm going to let Austin share a little bit more about his role with HCC and his role as a business consultant. And I want to thank everybody for being here from Houston Community College. I am Ravi Brahmbhatt, the Director for Student Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Hosting these webinars, we'll have 7 sessions altogether. This is going to kick us off for the first one. So thank you so much, Austin. How are you doing this
I'm
afternoon?
doing great, Ravi. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and excited to get started here.
All right, well then let's not wait. Go ahead and get started. Folks, if you have questions, go ahead and share it with the panelists and let us know. And Austin, you can choose to answer them at the end or in between, whatever you like, sir. This is your show.
Absolutely, we'll welcome it. Good deal. Thanks so much, Ravi. Good deal. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for taking a few moments of your time today to spend with us on this very, very insightful webinar, and not just webinar, but webinar series. So as we move down and get further into the series, we're going to cover a lot of things that we would like for you as either current business owners or aspiring business owners to keep in mind as you build a successful enterprise in a post-pandemic world. So as Ravi mentioned, I do a lot of work with HCC, Entrepreneur in Residence, and then in my day job, I'm a certified business coach, and I do executive leadership coaching, specifically focused around organizational growth strategy. So it's a very, very interesting and fulfilling work for myself. So my challenge for today here is to really make everybody on this call just a little uncomfortable, because as we know that with this COVID, this pandemic, people say, oh, this has never ever happened to me before. Well, absolutely. This is a once-in-a-lifetime kind of event. Well, the challenge and the discomfort I want you to feel is that we have to engage in some new thinking, because as the placemat says, the napkin says, the same old thinking is going to continue to create the same old results. And if there was ever a time that we really need to be thinking differently about what's in front of us and what will be in front of us, this is that time. So that's my goal. That's my challenge for us today. So as we get into the meat of the presentation today, let's talk a little bit about the problem. And the problem is that not that long ago, for those of you who are in existing enterprises, you're probably feeling pretty good about where you were. So let's just go back a few weeks, couple months. Beginning of the year, what was going on? Stock market, record high. Unemployment, a record low. Very robust, solid economy. So things were really, really working well for all of us. We were probably feeling pretty good about our enterprise, probably feeling really good about the prospects for 2020, because as you remember back in 2019, 2020 was going to be the great year, right? The year of clear vision, right? So most of us were expecting some very good things, right? But, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, a lot of times we take so much on our shoulders. It's all about us. We're dragging that big heavy rock up the hill, hoping that at some point in time we'll kind of get things figured out. We can bring in more people to help us and that sort of thing. But for the most part, we're a self-reliant, resilient group of people, and that's why we chose entrepreneurship as our way of being. But as we know, as our businesses grow, as they scale, as we endeavor to do more things, create more customers, more revenue, hire employees, the level of complexity changes in our business. And so this picture here of the guy that's trying to keep all these plates spinning all at one time, that should probably resonate with many of us here on the phone today as the way we operate our respective businesses. This is and we'll talk a little bit more about this a little bit later on. Not optimally the way we run our businesses, but I understand that particularly as we're getting started, this is kind of the way of life. So we got all of this stuff going on in our business lives, and then what happens? Then COVID-19 hits. So yeah, that's right. COVID-19 hit our economy almost like a nuclear bomb. It just exploded all at once, and all that good stuff that we were experiencing at the beginning of the year has all gone the other direction. So as we look at some of the current statistics, unfortunately, the stock market took a big drop. Unemployment, surged to a 50, 60-year high, and many businesses are teetering on some form of failure or bankruptcy, and then you've got everything in between. So right now, it's a very, very critical time. And one of the things that I see in my business coaching practice and in the work that I do with the entrepreneurs at HCC is that there's this deer-in-the-headlights look that I'm getting from entrepreneurs and business owners, because they're trying to figure out what's next. What's next? They're scared. But and that's a question I get all the time. Again, what's next? What do I see the future? And I always tell people, my crystal ball is no clearer than yours. Well, no clearer than yours. And so, as a result of this pandemic, this economic explosion, here's kind of how we're feeling about ourselves: confused, lost, disoriented, bewildered. One or all of these may apply to your personal situation, and perhaps, maybe they all do, and some. So what's the big idea? So the whole idea here, as I said, we talked about, I want to evolve, challenge your thinking, get us thinking about how we power out of this pandemic. And the goal is not to just survive. The goal should be to thrive. So what I want you to do is think about yourself. Think of yourself as a strong rider. So here we have this female champion, Tour de France, great athlete. She won the multi-day challenge, all that other good stuff. Very, very strong rider. But what would happen if you were to put that strong rider on this weak bike? All of us here on this call today, you would put us on the same bike against that world-class athlete, we'd have a pretty good chance of beating them at their own game because of the weak bike. It sort of levels the playing field. Would you agree? So as a result, it creates an opportunity for us, because if you think about yourself as that rider, you're still the same person you were back in January. But what's the difference? The difference is that your business or the underlying economics or some of the fundamentals of your business has changed. And now you're that great athlete, that prolific, who's had prolific accomplishments, and now you're riding a weak bike, or your business has been weakened. So here's our opportunity. The things that we need to do and engage in to build a stronger bike, or in our case, a stronger business, it's all learnable. It's all learnable. I mean, for those of you who've been in business for a few years, there's things that you learned along the way that have now made you a better business person. I don't even have to take a poll on that. I just know that is the world order. Absolutely. And there's more good news. Others want to help. Why am I here on this webinar today? Why are Ravi and I, why are we doing this? Because we believe in the power and the possibilities associated with entrepreneurship, and we want to do our part. So you have Ravi and I. You've got the greater entrepreneurial community within HCC. You have a number of other agencies, some supported by your governmental dollars, some supported by other not-for-profits. They're all here. We want to help all of us to succeed. Because the goal is, for many of us, why did we go into entrepreneurship in the first place? Because we wanted to make a big impact. And there's still that possibility. And with that impact, we're able to create huge rewards for ourselves, not just for ourselves, but for the people that we interact with. Think about our ecosystem. Yes, I think for many of us, More money is part of that reward, but that's not the only thing. The ability to make a difference, to leave a legacy, to leave the world a better place. Those are typically all the things that come into play when you ask an entrepreneur why they do what they do. And as I started earlier in the conversation, this is not about crystal ball, and this is not about trying to figure out what's going to be next. So my favorite lines when people ask me, Austin, what's in your crystal ball? I share this with them. The best way to predict the future is to create it. By Peter Drucker, one of my favorite business gurus. So before we move on to the 5 key principles, I'd like us to just take a moment and let's reflect. Is there any questions, comments about what we've covered so far before we get into the key principles? What I'm going to do is, as Robbie asked you earlier, just take a peek into the chat box. Just throw your questions in there. Let me take a look and see what's come across here. Okay, so one of the questions. Thank you for those who put this in here. It's Austin. What are you hearing from your clients? So, and I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but there's this sense of deer in the headlights that I'm getting from my clients. They're not sure what to do. So many are somewhere in the process of either applying for their PPP loans or their emergency disaster loans, EIDL, or they're either applying or they're waiting to receive them or that sort of thing. So that's caused a lot of, I would say, aggravation, of course, but it's caused a lot of this sort of suspending of activity. People aren't moving forward, and they're sitting at home waiting for these dollars to show up before they take any proactive action about getting on with their business life, or at a minimum, preparing for what's to come or what they should be focusing on post-pandemic. So thanks for that question. That's what I'm hearing. And then again, thoughts on when we return to normal. So, if you press me for an answer, I think the answer is the normal has left the building. We need to be thinking about new normal, and then we need to be thinking about a long-term recovery. Because if you think about structurally in a few industries what's transpired, think airlines, think hospitality industry, think any industry that brings lots of people together in a single place. Think anything around trade shows, conventions, concerts, that sort of thing. There is just going to be a very, 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 very long road to recovery. And I'm also a believer that, and science bears me out, what is it? You pick the number. Our habits, it takes some amount of time to change our habits and behaviors, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. By the time this thing lifts, meaning our stay at home, maybe it'll be 90 days or so, or maybe a little bit more. But we would have changed our habits and our behaviors. So the things that we were doing before the pandemic, they may no longer be on our radar. So it may take us another 90, 180 days to go back to those types of behaviors that we were engaged in prior to the pandemic. So I think that if you're looking at sort of a quick recovery, I don't think that's in the cards. I think what we need for most industries, we need to be thinking about some sort of recovery in the 2021 mid to late time frame. This my uninformed opinion. So good. Hey, appreciate those questions. Keep them coming. Got the chat box open, so love to hear it. So let's kind of get into some of the 5 key principles. Now, I assure you, we could talk about this whole concept of mindset for at least a half day, if not a couple days. But today, I just want to leave you just with a few things here. So just again, to get you thinking about the possibilities and to start getting you closer to taking some action about what's next for you. So in times like this, probably one of our most powerful mindsets or things that we could be focusing on or things to be understanding is our ability to embrace change. And so what does change look like? So in my practice, we often use what we call this little diagram called the sigmoid curve, or probably more accurately for what our purposes here, it's the business life cycle curve. And so it's not just applies to businesses. It could apply to your career, and most importantly, it could even apply to the relationships that we have in our lives. So there's three key elements, or three phases. There's the learning phase, there's the growth phase, and there's the decline phase. So in every relationship, these phases are very, very, very predictable, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, and I think that this will resonate. But the one thing I'd like you to remember as you look at this curve, for many of you for the first time, is that growth always comes after learning. And then as we go through our growth cycle, as the decline phase indicates, nothing lasts forever if we don't continue to ask questions about reinvention, transformation, how things are changing. Because if we just let the curve run its natural course, we'll find ourselves in a decline phase. So you could almost say that what we're going through economically was almost predictable, right? Because we had come out of the Great Recession of 2008. The economy was on this 12-year tear of ever-increasing productivity, GDP, lower unemployment, all kinds of good things. And, you know, as we know, all this good stuff, none of it lasts forever. So in some respects, you could say that a decline was coming. In fact, if you listen to the people that opined on Wall Street, they were saying that a market pullback was in order. But of course, I will be very honest to say, nobody expected what we actually got in terms of the coronavirus. So what we often see in the learning phase, and we'll take this more from the perspective of the business owner entrepreneur for this particular webinar, well, we'll talk about the honeymoon trap. Think about it when you first started your enterprise, or as you start your enterprise. A lot of excitement, right? You know, boy, I'm really doing something. I'm going to take control of my life, my career. I've got this great product or this great service offering. People are going to love it. And so things are really, a lot of excitement, a lot of energy. You know, you're talking to family and friends. They're buying your products and services and saying, wow, this is really working well. And then in not too distant future from that, then we have what we call the 3 feet from gold trap. And so what happens there is that, you know, we've sold to all our family and friends. We've had some initial success with our young enterprise. And now what's happening is it's turning out to be a little bit more problematic. Right? We're not getting the traction because, again, we sold to family and friends. They gave us this, you know, kind of a maybe an unrealistic view that, hey, this, you know, I've got some really good stuff here. But now that we start talking to people that we don't know, talk to strangers, and start to create some traction, things get a lot tougher. And so a couple things will happen here. So people will get frustrated with what they're doing, and they may think about quitting. Or, preferably, is what they start out doing may no longer be working, so it might be a time to change the business model or the direction of your original idea. So the analogy of 3 feet from gold, it's a story about a guy that was running a gold mine, and he labored, no results, and that sort of thing. And then one day he gave up. He sold the mine to another investor. The investor came in, did some different calculations, did some different sciences, and true story, and literally started to mine the gold mine in a slightly different direction, made a few different assumptions, found gold, and it was one of the richest veins in North America. And so the moral of the story is keep pushing forward, don't give up, find new direction, but just stay in the game. So as we push forward, we stay in the game, and then the next trap that we'll run into is what we call the founder's trap. And in this trap, what we see happening here is that an owner has pushed through the 3 feet from gold trap, and now it's starting to get some traction, starting to add good customers, maybe not just good customers, not just customers, but the right kinds of customers who understand his or her value. Maybe you've added 1 or 2 people, but typically in this founder's trap, the founder is maybe a little hesitant about letting go, meaning they become the bottleneck for the organization because they've got to make all the decisions, and we all kind of know intuitively what happens when all the decisions or anything of importance has to end up on one person's desk that's already overwhelmed. Things just can potentially grind to a halt. So this is the time to avoid or successfully exit the founder's trap. This is where you're hiring the right people for the right reasons. You're focused on getting good process and procedures into place because at this point you want to start to set the foundation to create the organization that runs by itself, that runs independent of you, the owner founder. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but that should be sort of an end goal or primary goal for all of us, that our business can run independent of us, because this allows you to have the type of control over the organization that you control the organization, it doesn't control you, and then it allows you to create time for life's other priorities. So as we successfully maneuver the founder's trap, then we find ourselves moving into what we call the Midas trap. And the Midas trap is when we've successfully navigated these other three traps, and now life is pretty darn good, right? So the owner is thinking, well, everything I touch turns to gold. Boy, I can never see things being any better than this, and we're just rocking and rolling along, and wow, it is great to be a business owner, right? So this is what's happening here. And so what we often see sometimes the owner, when they find themselves in this Midas trap phase, they let up on the gas a little bit, right? So and what that means is maybe they're not working as hard, or they're working differently, or things that were a big deal previously are no longer a big deal, and the list goes on and on. So if left to its own devices, the organization will find itself in that denial trap. And denial trap in the decline phase. And so what we often see here is this is when the owner is not paying attention to the red flags that are occurring. And red flags come in all shapes, sizes, and flavors. So just think about it. There's technology risk that's associated with many businesses. Maybe there's a sudden a number of people on your team are leaving you, or there's a lot more arguing in the ranks. Your revenues starting to flatten out or decline, along with profits, same thing. And that denial is, hey, I've seen this before, everything will be okay, we'll just let it run its course, as opposed to taking some sort of proactive action. And so to prevent this, astute owners who are on top of their business, they're keeping their finger on the pulse of the business, and when they start to see those red flags, they take that proactive action to right the ship, to avoid the decline phase. Now, and again, solutions in this category could be many. It could be, we hire a new leadership team, we adopt a new strategy, maybe we make an acquisition, or maybe we divest some portion of our business. But we're doing something to redirect the business so that we can capture new opportunities. So, and then as you do that, almost by default, by design, you're probably going to be putting yourself as an organization or a department or a function back into the learning phase. Because again, we can't have growth without first learning. So we'll find ourselves in some respect repeating, going through those same stages or traps. But the beauty of having been through it a few times, we may find ourselves, let's say post-acquisition or post-merger, going through the phases maybe a little bit faster. So that's kind of the whole concept there. So again, the sigmoid curve, think of it as your business life cycle. So before we move on, I'd like to just take a quick peek at the chat room and see what questions, if any, have come in. Okay. Good. Great question here. How do I use the sigmoid curve to my advantage? So great question here. So I think there's a couple things that you can do. It's one is just being cognizant that the good stuff never lasts forever, and of course the bad stuff doesn't last forever. But I think what's kind of mission critical here is to help the members of your team understand what's going on, and this is a way to keep them focused. So let's say you're accelerating. Let's say you find yourself in the Midas trap, right? And things are really going well, and boy, I mean you're taking good care of your people, And I think it's really important, incumbent upon you as the owner, to remind your team, hey, this doesn't last forever. So the metrics that we've established for ourselves, or the goals that we put in place, that we hold ourselves accountable to, those continue to be very, very important, and we will continue to measure them. And then I think, as importantly, is that as we help people understand what the life cycle looks like, then we've got to say, hey, look, should we get to a point where ABC happens, or we see this red flag, here's the types of actions that we need to be taking. So what you're doing, you're giving people a heads up, not scaring them, but you're informing them, you're educating them, giving them a heads up that in the event that something should not go as planned, here's kind of what our get well plan is, our remediation plan, and that sort of thing. It's very similar to what we saw for those of us who were here in Houston post Hurricane Harvey. Who were the firms that accelerated out of that the fastest? It's those that had contingency plans or survivability plans in place. Who to call, what vendors to get a hold of, what technology should we be using, those kinds of things. So this is no different in terms of a tool that you can use with your team to prepare them for when things get a little rocky. And as that curve indicates, that will occur. The only thing that curve doesn't predict is when it will. And so this is why it's so important for you as the owner to keep your finger on the pulse as to what's transpiring, or more importantly, have measures in place that will tell you and your team that things need to be addressed or things need to be looked at. Okay? Thanks for that question. Appreciate that. So the second principle is what we call balancing roles. Oftentimes we find ourselves, and I'm a business owner as well, so I too am guilty of this, but we find ourselves wearing way too many hats. And we're trying to be all things, all people at all times, everywhere and every time, which is just ludicrous. So the concept I'd like to share with you right now is what we call 3 Eyes of the Entrepreneur. And this is a concept that was developed by Michael Gerber in his book, The E-Myth Revisited. We do a lot better job of turning this to a nice pictorial. But if you are, whether you're young in your entrepreneurial career or you're advanced, I'd encourage you to read this book. It has some very, very good information, great insights about what we as entrepreneurs should be thinking about. So let's talk about, for a second here, the 3 Eyes of the Entrepreneur. And basically, it's 3 different roles that an entrepreneur plays. So the first one is one of technician. So if you think about it, the technician, what is the technician's role? They have their eye on the ball, on the eye of the client. So they're the ones that are in the bakery. They're the ones in the back, making the bagels, right? Or they're the ones that are, if it's a landscaping business, those are the folks that are out there cutting lawns. Their focus is not what happened with, it's not their next lawn or their last lawn. It's the lawn that's right in front of them. So they have a very, very narrow view of what their role is in the company. It's that work that's right in front of them. And of course, that's very, very important role to play because that's what gets us paid, right? Adequately, properly, competently serving a client. Then the next role is the role of the manager. So the manager, think of it as, say, maybe the sales manager. Maybe it's your accounting or your bookkeeper. But this is the person that's looking back in time to evaluate the level of success that the company has had. So I'm a recovering CPA, full transparency, so I get this role. When I was practicing accounting, it was always looking backwards and say, here's what we did, keeping score, here's what we could have done better, that sort of thing. So a very, very, very important role, but again, not a role that you as an entrepreneur should be spending the bulk of your time on. Again, this goes back to get to that outsource conversation. And so then the third role is the role of the entrepreneur. So think back for you that when you were starting your organization, or those of you that are currently in startup mode, this is that whole visioning, looking out to the future process, right? This is where we say, hey, I had a bad experience doing ABC. I think I could do better. I'm going to start a business that competes with that other company or that other offering, and I think I can do it better. And I'm going to do it better by doing X, Y, and Z. So that's the mind of the entrepreneur, or the role of the entrepreneur, looking out to the future. What are the unmet needs of a market? What are the different ways to service that client, that market? And then most importantly, determining or figuring out ways to go out and capture it. So that's the role of the true entrepreneur. Now, again, so of course, everything within balance, and we'll talk about this on the next slide, but we want, all of us should be engaged in a little bit of each one of these levels. And the one caveat or watch out for the entrepreneur is you don't want to create too many new opportunities or let me put that another way. It's okay to create the opportunities, but just recognize that your organization in its current state can only absorb so much change at one time. Now, as an entrepreneur, if you should decide that as you create these new ideas, these new visions, you add staff, and you can do so in a profitable way, then have at it and keep creating. So when we look about the mix of how we should spend our time as an entrepreneur in this 3 I's of the entrepreneur, probably somewhere around, at a minimum, 20% of the time should be spent on those pure entrepreneurial activities, the vision, the mission, who should we be partnering with, who are some key clients, what are some different ways to approach the business, or what new problems should we be attempting to solve with new solutions, creating more opportunities for the firm. Minimum 20%. The best run firms, that entrepreneur, that leader is probably spending closer to 40 to 50% of their time. And like I said, those manager and technician roles, absolutely mission critical to the success of the organization. But our opportunity there is to hire great people to take on those roles and/or look at outsourcing opportunities, bringing in other firms to take on that for you. Now, I will have one caveat. There's one exception to this. So for those of you who are professional service providers, let's say doctors, attorneys, and that sort of thing, or basically your technical skill is your firm, I would expect you to maybe spend a little bit more time being a technician because, if your bill rate's $400 or $500 an hour, that's the juice for your firm or for your organization. But I say that, but I don't want you to give up your entrepreneurial responsibility either. The way you balance it is by having a strong, whatever you call it, office manager, business manager, practice manager, so that all those sort of non-technical things that you're doing, right, you're able to lay off on that manager to do. And then if I'm a technician, if you see yourself as, attorney, doctor, lawyer, whatever, as that strong technician, I would implore you to hire a cast of paraprofessionals that can take on those lower value activities so that you can always continue to focus on those values and those activities that are of highest value and that only you as the highly accomplished technician can perform. So I hope all that makes sense. So let me talk about what's key for you here. So let me just take a peek at the chat room and see what we have here.
Hey, Austin, Ravi here. I have some chats that came directly to me, so I don't know if you would
please jump, Ravi.
These questions. Yeah, so really, I'm going to paraphrase this question, but how best can you explain the 3 roles to the team? How does an entrepreneur or a business owner explain that to the team?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and thank the audience for asking that. So I think what it really boils down to is we need to be very conscious of what are we really good at. Individually, what are we really good at? Or I like to say, what is our area of awesomeness, right? How often do you go into an organization and you ask somebody what they do, and they say, I do a little of this, a little of that, or I do everything that nobody else wants to do. And that's funny and it's entertaining, and I understand that that's important sometimes in fast-moving organizations. But that is absolutely the wrong way to think about the business, right? Because if we're just doing a little of this or a little of that, we never have the opportunity to become an expert at anything. And so if you think about, if we go back to that, I'll go back to that last slide. The whole idea or the goal here is we want to create some expertise at each one of those levels hopefully, as an entrepreneur, it's not a one-man band. We're able to, have some people or have some external resources. But the whole idea is to help people get really, really exceptional at whatever their role is as a technician. I mean, let's think about it. Do you want your sales manager to also be your accounting manager and your office manager? Absolutely not. Those three roles take absolutely different skill sets, training, desire to do those sorts of things. So you don't want to sort of combine them just because it's convenient. You want to combine them in such a way or keep them separate so that you can get what's best for the entire organization. So again, just to wrap up, this pictorial. This is a great way to demonstrate or share or educate your team that we all have a gift or talent, and we should be using it accordingly. So just because you are a technician doesn't mean you can't. You'll live and die in that organization as a technician. But before we give you something else to do, we're going to make sure you've mastered the technician skills as well as mastered the managerial skills. So I think hopefully that answers the question that was posed. So that's great. Do we have any more, Robbie, or should we move on?
You do have another one. I guess this is more for the prior slides. But best way to realign the company using the three roles principle.
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes back to the answer I gave before. So I think once there's an understanding that there's these different roles to play, right? Then I think what we do is, and this is something that, small businesses are very, very guilty of, then I think we go ahead and capture that information in either in a variety of things, in a job description, in an employee handbook, and most importantly, in the processes, procedures, and work or desk instructions attached to each role. Why is that important? Because, and we'll talk about it later in our series, but what we'll talk about is the importance of measuring success, creating dashboards and metrics so that we know how we are progressing against the goals that we're setting. Because think about it. If you've got, let's just pick on the manager for, in the example I used previously. If you've got a manager that does everything that nobody else wants to do, so they're doing a little accounting, they're doing a little bit of sales analysis, they're doing some office management, they've got all these cats and dogs. At the end of the year, how would you, or not the end of the year, at the end of some sort of measurement period, you ask the question, how did we do? How does that person answer the question? Or how do you answer that question? Because they were torn in 25 different ways on a daily basis. Everything was only getting half done or at very little, or it was getting done, but at a very low quality, that very low level of quality. So I would use, the education associated with this slide or this concept to create job descriptions, policies, processes, procedures, and most importantly, I would use this as a way to evaluate as a driver to the benchmarks, dashboards, and key performance indicators that we're talking about. Like I said, again, we'll cover that more later in the series. Okay, good. Well, I've got a really top-notch group here, Robbie. We're asking some great questions. Okay. So as we move on to principle number 3, a quote from Viktor Frankl, who was probably one of the more famous Holocaust survivors, which obviously a very, very difficult situation. But he said that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedom, and that's to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And I tell you, folks that have joined us today, this is probably should be the mantra for as we move through this pandemic, because this is the advanced level of thinking, the advanced mindset approach that we all need to have as we go through this very, very difficult period, and we don't know what's coming out on the other side. So great attitude, yeah, right? Easier said than done sometimes. But in the slides that follow, we'll talk about how important a great attitude is, right? So if we think about it, think about mentality. Think about the victor mentality. So there we are. We have an individual, hands raised. We have the acronym PROVE. And PROVE stands for proactive, responsible, taking ownership, having a vision, excellence. So business owners, I'd like you to take a step back, maybe to think about your current business, or maybe a time when maybe you were working someplace else. But if members of your team regularly came to you on a proactive basis, offering up a couple of different ways every week how to do something better, a new opportunity to explore, if you gave them a task, they took full ownership of that task, and if they said, I'll have it by the end of the day, or I'll have it by noon tomorrow, and you knew that it was going to happen because they bought in, they had ownership, and they engaged in excellent work, take for a moment and think, how great could your organization be? Or what would be the limits of success or advancement that organization had if you had, most, if not all of your people acting as victors in your workplace? So, yeah, a great place to, maybe that's a perfect world, but I think it's something that we should strive for. Now, the reverse of that is our buddy called the Benz, right? He's the guy all hunched over. He's got the victim mentality working for him, right? So he's blaming people. He's making excuses, always negative, in denial, and thinks in terms of scarcity as opposed to abundance. So what does that talk track sound like for that individual, as now we're sort of, we're really starting to feel the effects of the pandemic, and we don't know what it's going to look like coming out the other side? Oh, woe is me. Why does this have to happen? I can't believe that this happened to me. Oh, my God. Life will never be the same. There's, when we come out of this thing, there's only going to be a few opportunities. My business is doomed or my career is doomed. I absolutely cannot see anything positive that's going to come out of that. Now, I don't have to ask the question that if you and or your teams are approaching things in this victim mentality, what that's going to do to your organization, short-term and long-term. Because people with the bends or the victims, they all see things that happen, the speed bumps of life, the speed bumps of life, they see them all as consistently as problems. Whereas the victors have problems too. Victors are running into the same challenges and speed bumps that the victims are, but they see them as opportunities. In fact, during this pandemic, what I like to think of myself as an eternal optimist. The glass is always half full, always. But what I'm seeing here, but my mantra that I'm adopting and I'm sharing in my webinars and the conversations I'm having is like, hey, look, this pandemic has created new problems, which will require new solutions. And for those of us who are paying attention and have got the right mindset, it's creating new opportunities for us personally and for our businesses, and most importantly, for the people that we touch on a daily basis. So my question to you, those who are assembled, do you want to be a victim or do you want to be a victor? So, Robbie, anything in the chat box that we need to address? I'm going to take a sip of water here.
Yes, there is a question, Austin, and I'm going to paraphrase it again, but why is it that owners don't spend as much time looking in the forward role, when you shared that three perspectives?
Yeah, another great question. So I think that all the work that I've done with entrepreneurs and business owners, and this is true of most of them, it's unfortunate, but they get so wrapped up about what's in front of them, they just find it so difficult to lift their head and look out beyond, what's going on tomorrow, next week, next month. Is because they've allowed themselves, I call it the tyranny of the urgent. And this is something we'll talk about later in the series as well. But they get so wrapped up in what's right in front of them that they can't put on their big picture glasses or headlights and say, what's out there tomorrow. I mean, the ability to say, no, that's not a priority right now, or no, I want you to take that to Sally and have her address it. Just the ability to turn things down and to escape this mentality that they have to be all things to all people at all times, and that they have all the answers. So invariably, so just to advance a little bit, invariably, I mean, I'm sure we're all familiar with the whole concept of private equity, how these professional management firms, they go in and they buy companies, and then they go in and buy companies and they do their private equity magic, and now, in 5 years or less, the company was worth 3, 4, 5 times what they originally paid for it. So do you know what the number one reason why an owner-founder sells out to a private equity firm? The number one reason is that the owner will tell you, and I've had this conversation many times, is that they don't have any more new ways to grow. And so they've hit the ceiling on growth, and so they figure out it's time to sell. So the question is how does somebody coming behind them figure out how to get the company back into a growth mode, and they can sell the company for 5 times, what they had bought it for? One word: mindset. The new owners are not distracted by the sins, the evils, or the practices of the past. They come in with a new set of eyes on old problems. Now, as a business owner, are they forever confined to that? I got to get to a certain point, then I give it away? Absolutely not. So as we talked about previously, there's a number of ways to continue to push through that to block. And as I showed you on the sigmoid curve, the decline trap. That if we bring in again entertain new strategies, bring in new people, maybe make a merger, make an acquisition, or just really challenge the entire team to think differently about what's in front of them, we can move beyond that. Easy to share, easy to say, but very difficult to do. Good. So, man, great questions. Huh? Let me keep moving on here, Robbie. So the fourth part of this mindset series of the key principles is setting and achieving any goal. So obviously, goals are very, very important. They keep us focused. More importantly, they keep us focused on the future, about what is to come. Because as you notice in our attitudes section there, the guy that Mr. Benz or Mr. Victim focuses on what's happened in the past. So the whole idea with goals is to continue to focus on the future. And then we have a little bit of a formula on how we set and achieve our most ambitious goals. First of all, we've got to be very clear and decide what it is actually that we want. So, and then we've got to write it down. So a desire of the heart or a desire to be better that's not written down continues to be a dream. So it's very, very important to write them down. So, I mean, what I find myself doing is on a daily basis, I write out all my goals. And what's empowering about that is they start to become real by me writing them out on a daily basis. And what's even more important, I get more ideas about how to achieve those goals because I've let them rest or reside in my subconscious. We need to attach a date to our goals. I was on a call yesterday, and one woman said, hey, I work better with deadlines, so if you need me to do something, give me a deadline, and I'll make sure it gets done. So it's that thinking, and it's how we engage our brain and how we get ourselves to that better state by attaching a date to it. And then as we have what it is we want to do, we've written it down, then we create a list of all the things that we need to do to accomplish that. And when I say create a list of things we need to do, it's some of the things we'll do, some of the things we may delegate to somebody else, some of the things we may outsource to another source. But the list of what needs to be done is absolutely mission critical. So as we create our list, we go back and prioritize it to make sure that we're working on our highest value activities at all times. This goes back to the 3 I's of the entrepreneur. I want my entrepreneur, when he or she is in entrepreneur state, to be working on those highest priorities, those things that are going to drive the firm forward. And then the big deal, get started, right? Because and this was a sin that I had earlier in my career. I was great at items 1 through 5, but I was a very slow starter because I was absolutely suffered from analysis paralysis, and I figured I could plan my way to success. And the most important thing you can do is eat the frog. Hopefully hopefully I'm not destroying anybody's upcoming meal here, but there's a concept that we use in our practice we call eat the frog. So and it's a very simple simple concept. So if you think about it, that if one of your things to do for the day was to eat a frog, would it be easier to eat that frog first thing in the morning, or would it be easier to look at that frog for 8 hours, wait till the end of the day, and then decide to consume it? So now most of us are going to say, if I got to eat a frog, it's going to be the first thing in the morning. It's the most distasteful, unappealing thing that I have to do for the day. So let's get it done first thing out of the way, and let's get on with life. So what does that mean for us entrepreneurs on the phone? So I've done sales coaching for a number of organizations and a number of small business owners. So things like, let's be real honest here, things like prospecting. Well, picking up the phone, calling people that we don't know or we barely know or some combination thereof. That is for many of us, that's a very distasteful or uncomfortable process. But if we get it done first thing in the morning, we get to check the box, get that endorphin rush, and we're on to other things that we might like a little bit more. So again, taking action is absolutely mission critical and the primary key to success. So Robbie, any other comments in the chat room?
No, Austin, I think we're good for now.
Okay, great.
I'm not seeing any new questions that haven't already been kind of answered.
Okay, good deal. Okay. I guess we're hitting the meaty parts of the presentation. And then a final tool that I would encourage all of you to use is what we call the Mindstorm solutions. So it's a slightly different approach. So when we talk about the mindstorming, we decide, what is it that we're trying to achieve. So we're kind of doing that Stephen Covey, beginning with the end in mind. So we're going to look out to what does that future state look like, and then we start with the future, and then we kind of work back. We work backwards, and as we feed our mind on how we achieve that future state, again working backwards, we're saying things in the positive. So let's say, let's just kind of pick on weight loss. Always a great goal or a future state that many of us like, to lose 10 pounds or something like that. So you might make a statement like, hey, let's say I weigh 220 pounds now. So I want to weigh 200 pounds by the end of the year. So what does that do? So then you just kind of work backwards. Well, I know that nutrition and exercise is very important. So I'm saying, hey, I'm working nutrition. I'm having appropriate balance of carbs, fats, and proteins on a daily basis. And then I'm going to let Sunday will be my cheat day where I'll allow myself to have one meal full of empty calories. Same with your exercise regime. But the key thing here is we talk about these things very in the positive. We ask ourselves a question. So what does my I know I jumped ahead a little bit there, but what does my eating program look like? My eating regime, I don't like to use the word diet, but what does my eating regime look like if I want to lose, 40 pounds or 20 pounds within the 6 months? What kind of exercise regime do I need to partake of if I want to lose 20 pounds in addition to a good diet in the next 3 to 4 months? The big one is no criticism. We just generate the ideas. We don't evaluate them. We just get them down on the whiteboard or in our notebooks, and we don't discuss why they may or may not happen. And then if we get stuck as we're creating this, because we should probably create about 20 to 30 questions in this mind storing process, but we use different colors. It's proven that if we use different colors, it stimulates other parts of our brains and reignites the creativity that we have. And then thinking opposites, right? So so we say, okay, we have exercise is going to be something we do. We say, well, what if we didn't exercise? How could we accomplish this goal? So we think in opposites, because we all kind of know for many of the things that we're working on what some of the tried and true ways are, but by engaging in this whole concept of thinking opposite, we might create either some better ideas, some alternative ideas, or might be able to combine those ideas with what we've already captured to create an optimal solution for us, right? Okay. So as we kind of get into the home stretch here, Ravi, anything else in the chat room we need to speak to?
Yeah, just could you share what's the difference between mindstorming and goal setting? Someone said, isn't that the same thing, or is it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the difference is that with goal settings, where typically, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, typically our goal setting process will come out of kind of our strategic planning process, where we said, okay, here's the direction that we want to be, and then here are the building blocks that we need to have in place to make that happen. So let's say I want to double the size of the firm, and so there's 4 key goals attached to that. So I've got to hire 20 more people. I got to amp up my sales team, build a better supply chain, so on and so forth. So we got some specific goals, and then we go about sort of a building block around how to have that. So the mindstorming is maybe when the future is not that defined, or we're looking for a breakthrough in our thinking or our business planning about to consider the possibilities. So it's usually when we're in a situation where we have less structure about what the way forward is. So I mean, a great question to ask right now is, what does my business look like in September of 2020, given all this that's transpired? And so I'll flip the question is, my business will look like ABC come September, and then we kind of work backwards as to building the pieces and the elements. So the goal setting, again, a little bit more structured as we move forward, and then we use the brainstorming to kind of work in reverse and lends itself to a far more creative process if that's what you're thinking you're needing. And I will say that where we are as we emerge, as at some point in time, we'll emerge from this pandemic, we're probably going to need a little bit more creative thinking as we go about creating our future. Okay. So just to recap, the key principles of having the mindset that's required to thrive, not just survive, coming out of the pandemic is got to be able to embrace change. We talked about the business life cycle or sigmoid curve that talks about the various stages. And never forget, learning comes before growth. Learning before growth. So if you're having some struggles growing your practice or have had them in the past, I encourage you to go back and look at what are the things that you and or your team need education or learning about. We talked about the 3 key hats. For everybody in your firm, where are their areas of awesomeness? And let's get all of you folks focused on that. We talked about the role and importance of a great attitude. That's going to be not to use these times as a joke, but great attitudes can become viral and can really, really change the difference of your organization. Got to have goals, and we talked about the ways to consistently achieve your goals. Too many of us have goals, but we have no effective way to achieve them. So we didn't talk about the process there. Then we talked about the whole concept of innovation through the concept of mindstorming. So what I'd like us to, I'm going to challenge you as we wrap up the presentation. I'm going to challenge you. I want you to go back to these sessions, these 5 principles, and pick out 1, 2, or 3 maybe key concepts that you took away, and make a commitment that between now and the next time we get together, you'll focus on taking some actions against that. Create 2 or 3 goal statements based on what we've shared, and then use the 7-step process that we talked about to achieve that particular goal. The process, and most importantly, write it down. But that process just restores your confidence, your faith in what it is you're doing, and by writing that down, working through that, creating your playbook, you're going to feel so much better about the uncharted road ahead. So good. So as we talked about earlier, we're doing this. This is the initial installment of our 7-part business resilience webinar series, and what's going to be followed up with is going to be a business resilience workshop that's going to be sort of focused on recovering from the COVID. So if there's interest in you potentially, it's probably going to be a 10 to 12 session workshop series, giving you, the owner, the leader of your business, to really drill down on critical elements of your business So there's the contact information if you want to go ahead, and we don't have any dates yet. It's probably going to be sometime late July, early August. But there's the email and phone number to get on the waiting list so that you'll be notified when things come about. So next week, on our next session, we'll cover retaining and growing your present portfolio of clients. Absolutely mission critical, because I think we know that it's far easier to sell to somebody that you're already selling to than it is to a brand new client. So we'll talk about some best and leading practices as it relates to that concept. So there I am. There's my contact information. That's a much younger and better looking Austin Toinette. Thank you, Photoshop. But if there's any information, questions you have, please feel free to reach out. And Robbie, in the not too distant future, this presentation and recording will be available in a library somewhere. Is that true? Virtual, it'll be on the YouTube under our HCC small business channel. So yes, we definitely will be uploading it. So let me just make it easier for folks on to get a copy of this. You would go to hccs.edu /small business, and then from there you'll be able to find the YouTube channel that has these videos. We'll post them there. So yeah, thanks, Austin. It'll be there. I guess you can call it the virtual library of the world. YouTube definitely has all of the knowledge of the world combined there. So yes, it will be posted there, and then the registration for the next workshops and all is also on the same website. So I encourage folks on the call here to attend the next session. Go ahead and register yourself. These are all being offered free, thanks to our HCC Office of Entrepreneurial Initiative sponsorship and getting Austin here to spend his time and expertise and give his advice to the business owners in our community to help us figure out what to do. We are definitely in an unprecedented time, and I don't think any one of us planned for a pandemic, so it helps to have some guidance and mentorship from folks like Austin, and certainly appreciate you sharing your contact information for us. Please do reach out to Austin directly and make use of this service from HCC. So thanks once again, Austin. I want to let you do the final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up. We'll end this session. Yes, Rob, thank you so much for facilitating our conversation today, and thank you for those who joined us. I know there's a lot of demands on your time, so we appreciate you taking a little time and spending with us today to learn about how you might come out in a little bit better shape on the other side of this pandemic. So the one thing that I do want to leave with you in closing is that, yes, we are in the middle of tough times, but things will be better. We'll come out of this, and we'll be better for it, and we're always better for it. So please, when you're getting down, think about yourself as the victor and not the victim, and the solutions and answers will come to you. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you again, Robbie.
Thank you, everybody. We're going to end this session.
Okay, bye-bye.